So in our last video, we left Vero Beach, Florida after 31 days at a marina for repairs and upgrades, headed up to a free night in Cocoa Beach, and then to New Smyrna Beach and Daytona to visit friends, then further north through Jacksonville on Memorial Day weekend, up to Fernandina Beach, Amelia Island, and to Jekyll Island, followed by a night in Beaufort, South Carolina. I finally pronounced it right. In today's video, we take a short hop up to Charleston, South Carolina, where we spend a couple days to avoid some weather, and then we head north up to Pawleys Island, Georgetown area. I do a quick segment on an upgrade we did to the battery monitor. We'll pass through Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head, where there's a lot of nice beachside homes, and up past Cape Fear and on to, I believe it's Carolina City. Have you ever dreamed of selling it all and cruising into the sunset? Well, that's exactly what we did. It's no fun going it alone though, so why don't you join us for the ride? Leaving Beaufort, South Carolina and headed north, the first thing we encountered was this monster dredging machine, and I was a little bit nervous because it looked like it was taking up the whole waterway, but as we got a little closer, found out it was a little bit more on our port side and there was just enough room to squeeze by. This dredging turned out to be quite an operation. Very large piece of machinery, and it looks like piping behind it for a good quarter of a mile, where they're reclaiming probably the solid material from the dredging operation and putting it back on land. It was a nice ride, and Pancake wanted some daddy time. So we found this nice little anchorage about 2 hours south of Charleston, South Carolina. Little tidal area. A lot of dolphin around. Very peaceful, oyster beds, just us. 360 degrees, beautiful. Nice breeze, it's about 80 degrees, should be in the 70s tonight. This is the best part. Just anchoring out, $1 million views. The clouds start to thin out after a few hours, and we were treated to another spectacular southern sunset. This anchorage was recommended on the Active Captain application, and I was surprised that we had it all to ourselves, considering how beautiful it was. As we headed towards Charleston, saw a lot of homes with very, very long docks. Apparently it's very shallow on the sides, and in order to get out to near the channel, they have to put these docks out there for at least a couple hundred feet. Overall, it was a nice scenic ride up to Charleston. You never know what you're going to see on the Intracoastal Waterway. One thing for sure, though, is they have the right of way, and you better get out of the way because they're not stopping for you. About a mile or so out of Charleston, there's a little canal that connects the Intracoastal Waterway right up to Charleston, so you peel off. It's well marked. Definitely a little bit of heavy current there, and it starts to get busy as you get near Charleston. This is our first view of Charleston coming from the south. And it wouldn't be a tourist town without a tourist pirate ship. One thing I love about Charleston is all the history and all the horse-drawn carriages. But it looks like they take good care of the horses. Though it was kind of a crappy day, Charleston is still a beautiful city to walk around and just stumble upon the different sights. I've always loved the architectural aspect of the homes and how the porches kind of had a wooden or formal entry door to them. So Lori and I had both been to Charleston before, so we didn't really go to any of the historical sites, but we did do some walking around, and of course, being island time, we had to stumble upon a beer garden. We stayed at the Safe Harbor Charleston City, but we didn't get a very good placement. As you can see, the current hitting the dock here made it pretty bumpy for one of the days we were there. After 2 days of bad weather, we had a beautiful morning and left Charleston with a nice sunrise as we passed by the mega dock that we stayed on the last 2 nights. As we headed north, we ran into more and more of the shrimp boats that we definitely expected to see in South Carolina and North Carolina.
You ever been on a real shrimp boat?
No, but I've been on a real big boat.
I'm talking about a shrimp catching boat.
Heading north from Charleston, we began to see a lot of floating debris. None of it was really big logs, but it was kind of like reeds from the grasses on the sides that would then clump up and hang out in the middle there. It's definitely something that can clog your intake, but not too dangerous to hit, I think. A lot of twists and turns along this way, but a scenic ride nonetheless. And one upgrade project that I really didn't touch on when we were in Vero was how we had to move our battery monitor. So I just want to go over that a little bit for those who might be interested.
So one of the most important things for cruisers to know is where their battery level stands, their energy consumption. So we installed this Victron Energy battery monitor. Right now it's saying there's almost 95% battery, which is great, but it has a bunch of selectable features. Things like how many amps you're using, watts usage. Actually, here's the amps. I'm using approximately 6 amps per hour right now. It says my battery voltage, 12.96, which is good. Battery temperatures, 80 degrees, etc. So this is important stuff. You can set alarms and notifications and everything. So what I'll do is just real quick run through how this was installed. So I'm installing this battery monitor shunt, or actually reinstalling it. Where it wasn't recording all the loads. So this allows my battery monitor to tell me what % state of charge the batteries are in. And you have to put it in line from your negative as close to the battery as possible where there's no loads connected. So that's that black cable there. I'm gonna have to cut it in 2 and splice this device into it. And hopefully I won't screw myself, because that's the only battery cable for the house batteries, and we won't have any juice. So hopefully it'll go well.
So here's a picture of the shunt in the existing location in the electrical panel. It was wired in line on the negative side, but too far away from the battery, so I want to move it. And it has 2 cables to it. One goes to the display, and one of the cables goes to the battery itself to measure temperature.
So the cable's too thick and wire cutters aren't working, and I've resorted to a small hacksaw. Hopefully this will do the job. Okay, so this is what a typical project looks like on Island Time. Cabinets up, electrical panel open. The shunt was over here, and I moved it to this back compartment in front of the batteries. And that's the completed install with data cable, and now I can monitor temperature of the batteries remotely as well. So everything's looking good. And had to snake the wire down and next to the chase, next to the fuel tank, but it went okay.
Pretty happy with the way it came out. Pretty clean installation. And one thing I forgot to mention is I had to remove the stairs to get to this little spot here in front of the batteries where the cables were. And the brand of the battery monitor is Victron, which is the same brand as my solar controllers and my inverter charger. But what you can see here is a display on my phone where I can monitor the batteries, which is kind of the top one here, and then the next two are the solar controllers, which have a lot of interesting information and allows me to manage this all remotely via Bluetooth. So this is pretty interesting. Up ahead, what looks to be a barge tied up to the right is actually a floating swing bridge. So when needed, it pivots out into the channel and crosses and connects the two pieces of land on each side. I think it's for railway, but I'm not sure.
Stopped at Hazard Marine, Georgetown, just off the Intracoastal Waterway. There's the shrimp boat, and behind the Carolina Grill is the seafood store. Nice little oak line street here in Georgetown, South Carolina.
So the marina is about 4 blocks from downtown Georgetown. We decided to walk in, and we're actually meeting some friends for dinner. It was a very nice walk, and you could see that, as typical of any main street, the houses were pretty nice. If I recall correctly, it was a Monday evening, so things were pretty much closed up, and not too many of the restaurants were open because it was Monday. Sure. We had dinner with our friends Bobby and Madonna, which we actually had met in Mexico. They knew we were tequila lovers, and Madonna surprised us with a bottle of tequila from South Carolina that was actually delicious, and now my favorite tequila. Heading north from Georgetown, South Carolina the next day, we were greeted by plenty of floating debris. One thing for sure is you can't be complacent when going up or down the ICW. There's always something floating, or crab pots, or something in the way. As we passed by the Pawleys Island area, we found it to be pretty murky and pretty swampy looking.
One of the few swing bridges that we've encountered so far.
As we passed the Myrtle Beach area, the landscape changed dramatically. Everything looked really clean and new, with house after house after house being built alongside the Intracoastal. This went on for many miles, and I looked it up on Zillow, and I want to say some of the newer homes were going for about 1.7 million and up. So waterfront property is definitely cheaper in the south, still well out of our price range. Now that's more like our price range. Campers on the water. I forgot to mention that we bought a pound of fresh shrimp in Georgetown. Probably some of the best shrimp that I've had. We did a number of different meals, from shrimp cocktail to shrimp scampi. That poor ship got into trouble at this inlet and definitely grounded and has been there for a long time. Can't blame the crew for being a little bored on these long days. We had a bit of a choppy ride to the Cape Fear area for about 45 minutes to an hour. Luckily the wind was behind us, so we had to dodge some larger cargo ships, but eventually we made our way and out of the wind to Carolina City. Smoothed out nicely as we were protected from the wind by these large banks that were full of a lot of different fishermen. It had been forecasted to be maybe 25 to 30 knot gusts that night, so we thought it was best to get a mooring ball versus anchoring, and we got one in Carolina City. They're first come first served, but you could also reserve them online, and we were able to do so. That was a nice feature. So here's a little bit of a map of our route for the last few days, up from Charleston and all the way north to just south of Wilmington, North Carolina, at a place called Carolina City. So that's a wrap on this week's video. Thanks for watching part 2 of our travels north on the Intracoastal Waterway. And come back next week to see part 3.